Deep in the frozen forests of North America, something ancient and hungry stalks the winter darkness. The Wendigo, a creature born of desperation, cursed by greed and feared for centuries. Native tribes warned it was more than a monster, it was a warning. But today, hikers, hunters, and even scientists swear this cannibal spirit is real. What if the legends were right, and the Wendigo is closer than we think? In the bitter depths of northern winters, when darkness claims the land and hunger gnaws at the bones, there exists an ancient horror known to the First Nations peoples. The Wendigo, a name that even today sends shivers through those who know its terrible legacy, emerged from the oldest stories of the Algonquian peoples, particularly among the Cree, Ojibwe, and Innu tribes who have lived in these harsh lands for countless generations. These people speak of a spirit born from the darkest aspects of human nature: greed, desperation, and the ultimate taboo of consuming human flesh. They tell of how the Wendigo stalks the frozen forests, its form a nightmarish mockery of the human shape. Those who have glimpsed it speak of a creature that towers above the tallest trees, its body a horrific study in starvation. Its skin stretches tight across protruding bones, gray and mottled with the black patches of frostbite. The eyes, they say, glow like burning coals in the darkness, and its mouth bristles with yellowed fangs designed to tear flesh from bone. The most terrifying aspect of the Wendigo is not its appearance, but rather its nature as a curse that can possess the living. The elders warn that anyone who tastes human flesh, even in the depths of winter starvation, risks becoming this creature. The transformation is said to be excruciating, the victim's spirit twisted by an insatiable hunger that can never be satisfied. As their body stretches and deforms, their humanity slips away until only the endless craving for human flesh remains. While modern tellings often adorn the creature with antlers or a deer's skull, the traditional stories speak of something far more horrifying: a being that retains just enough of its human appearance to lure in unsuspecting victims, yet warped beyond recognition by its cursed nature. The Wendigo serves as both warning and consequence, a spiritual manifestation of the horrors that await those who surrender to their darkest impulses in the unforgiving northern wilderness. Yet the Wendigo is more than mere legend. Throughout recorded history, its dark influence has left trails of horror across the northern lands. Perhaps the most chilling documented case is that of Swift Runner, a Cree trapper whose story still haunts the territories near Fort Saskatchewan. In the winter of 1879, Swift Runner and his family faced the brutal cold of the Canadian winter. What sets his tale apart from countless other winter hardships is a terrible truth: their camp was merely days away from emergency food supplies at a Hudson's Bay Company post. What happened in those dark winter months defied all human understanding. The authorities who later investigated found evidence of an unspeakable feast. Swift Runner had killed and consumed his entire family, his wife, 6 children, and even his mother. When captured, his eyes held a strange, haunted gleam as he spoke of a creature that had possessed him, forcing him to commit these atrocities. Though the law saw fit to execute him for his crimes, many elders whispered that his fate had already been sealed the moment the Wendigo claimed his soul. The Swift Runner incident marked only the beginning of a terrifying epidemic that swept through the Northern Territories from the late 1800s into the early 1900s. Communities began reporting disturbing cases of individuals who exhibited what Western medicine would later label Wendigo psychosis. These unfortunate souls described overwhelming urges to consume human flesh, accompanied by visions of transformation. Their eyes would grow wild with hunger, their bodies would twitch and contort, and they would speak of an insatiable hunger growing within them. The response of indigenous communities to these cases reveals the true gravity of the Wendigo curse. Tribal leaders sometimes made the grave decision to restrain or even execute afflicted members before they could fully transform. These were not decisions made lightly, but rather desperate measures to protect their communities from what they knew to be a supernatural threat. While Western psychologists attempted to classify these cases under medical terminology, Native elders maintained that no clinical diagnosis could capture the true supernatural horror of the Wendigo's curse. The Wendigo's influence persists into modern times. In 2008, near Fort Kent, Maine, a hunter's encounter opened old wounds in the collective memory of the region. The hunter described finding himself stalked by a decomposing humanoid figure whose eyes pierced the darkness with an unnatural glow. More disturbing still were the whispers he heard echoing through the trees, ancient Algonquian words spoken in voices that seemed to emerge from nowhere and everywhere at once. That winter, the woods around Fort Kent became a place of shadow and suspicion as local authorities reported an unusual spike in missing persons cases. While some dismissed the disappearances as the tragic result of harsh weather conditions, others noted how the victims seemed to vanish without trace, as if something had simply plucked them from existence. Those familiar with the old stories recognized a pattern that had repeated itself countless times across centuries. The hunting grounds of the Wendigo growing active once more. Local indigenous elders were consulted quietly by law enforcement, though their warnings went unheeded by official channels. They spoke of how the Wendigo's hunger grows strongest in times of plenty, when human greed and consumption reach their peak. It is in these moments, they cautioned, that the ancient spirit finds the most fertile ground for its influence, drawing power from humanity's own excesses. The Wendigo continues to cast its long shadow across the northern wilderness, with modern encounters suggesting this ancient horror has adapted to our contemporary world. Across Minnesota and the Canadian wilderness, hikers increasingly report being stalked by something they cannot quite see. They describe the sensation of eyes watching from between the trees and dark figures that linger at the edge of their vision. These shadows seem to follow for miles, always maintaining their distance, only to vanish like smoke when confronted directly. In 2016, the digital age captured what many believe to be evidence of the creature's existence. On a desolate Michigan road at 2 a.m., when the winter wind howled and snow blanketed the earth, a driver's dashcam recorded something that still defies explanation. The footage shows a grotesquely tall, emaciated figure crossing the road with an unnatural gait. Its limbs moved wrong, too fluid and elongated, its ribs clearly visible against skin that seemed to glow pale in the headlights. The video circulated briefly online before mysteriously disappearing from every platform where it had been shared. 2 years later, the online wilderness community was shaken by a viral Reddit post that would later be deleted by its terrified author. A group of experienced campers in Michigan's Upper Peninsula described their horrifying encounter during a winter camping trip. Their account detailed how they were awakened by screams that began as human but deteriorated into something that made their bones ache. In the beam of their flashlights, they glimpsed what they described as a thing with antlers that stood upright among the trees, its body twisted and wrong in ways their minds struggled to process. The group abandoned thousands of dollars worth of camping equipment in their desperate flight from the site. Perhaps most disturbing are the whispered accounts from Canadian search and rescue officers who speak only anonymously about cases that haunt their dreams. They tell of finding half-eaten bodies in the snow, but with teeth marks that match no known predator. They describe massive claw marks scored deep into tree trunks, higher than any bear could reach. Some speak of following tracks in the snow that begin as human boot prints, but gradually elongate and deform, leading deeper into the woods before vanishing entirely. Among all these modern sightings and encounters, one warning remains consistent, passed down through generations of indigenous peoples who know the true nature of this being. Never speak the Wendigo's name in the wilderness. This is not mere superstition, but a survival rule born from centuries of hard-won wisdom. The elders teach that the creature can hear its name being spoken, no matter the distance, and will begin hunting those who dare to summon it. Some say the Wendigo's hunger grows stronger with each passing year, as human greed and consumption mirror its own insatiable appetite. As reports of Wendigo encounters continue to accumulate across the Northern Territories, researchers and investigators have begun to propose more complex theories about the true nature of this phenomenon. Some wildlife biologists, speaking in hushed tones at academic conferences, suggest the possibility that an ancient predator species has survived in the vast, unexplored regions of the northern forests. They point to similar patterns in indigenous legends across cultures that speak of cunning, humanoid hunters that stalk the shadows of winter. Cryptozoologists have taken this theory further, proposing the existence of a relic population of prehistoric humanoid cannibals that have evolved to survive extreme cold. They cite the consistent physical descriptions across centuries: the impossible height, the emaciated form, the adaptation to winter conditions. These researchers suggest that perhaps the Wendigo legend began as a warning about real predators that hunted our ancestors, their existence gradually blending with supernatural elements as stories were passed down through generations. Yet paranormal investigators offer an even more unsettling possibility. Their research suggests the Wendigo might be an ancient spirit intrinsically bound to regions of extreme cold, manifesting only when specific conditions align. They note how sightings often cluster around periods of dramatic temperature drops and economic hardship, as if the entity feeds not only on flesh but on human suffering itself. Perhaps most chilling is the simple fact that defies all rational explanation. If the Wendigo were merely folklore, a cautionary tale told around fires to warn against the sins of greed and cannibalism, why do the reports persist? Why do modern witnesses, equipped with technology and educated in scientific skepticism, continue to encounter something that matches descriptions from centuries ago? In the end, the Wendigo's true nature might be more terrifying than any single explanation can encompass, suggesting that in the darkest corners of our world, ancient horrors still wait to remind us of primal fears we can never truly escape. So as you walk through the northern forests, remember that some legends persist because they hold kernels of truth too terrible to face. When winter descends and darkness claims the land, pay attention to the sounds carrying on the bitter wind. If you hear what seems like whispers in an ancient tongue or catch movement from something too tall and thin to be human, trust your instincts. The Wendigo has survived in our stories because perhaps it was never just a story at all. Next time you're alone in the woods and the wind sounds like a whisper calling your name, will you convince yourself it's just your imagination? Or will you run, knowing that by the time you hear the Wendigo's call, it may already be too late? Share your own encounters with unexplained phenomena in the northern wilderness in the comments below. Have you ever felt watched by something you couldn't quite see? Subscribe and hit the notification bell to uncover more terrifying legends that lurk in the shadows of our world.